The beginning one, the beginning class, so this is like the very first in this particular series. And as I was kind of mentioning on Sunday, the thing that I like about this particular program is it really is just an offshoot of a program that I heard about in 2006 from a guy named Ben Freudenberger that was teaching a sectional at the National Youth Gathering when I was there. And again, I was a vicar at that time, so it's not like this is a new concept that's out there. The other thing I like about it is it's not just trying to sell a package, although there's a lot of, people that are selling those types of things. So it's kind of nice that now, 17 years later, a lot of these guys are just simply saying, I don't care if I make money on this or not. This just has to change in the churches. And so that's why the Missouri district has jumped onto this year too, and made it an emphasis that we're talking about and encouraging congregations to kind of get back, putting the responsibility back of faith formation in the homes. Okay, so that's a huge shift. And there'll be, there's, I don't want to say obstacles to it, but it really, can change the way we think about a lot of different things. So, like I said, I don't want to be known as a pastor that took out Sunday school at a church, but like my heart really says, a parent that's like investing a lot of time into a church, but not necessarily the amount of time into their child is, we're working backwards in this, this kind of concept. So we really want to just kind of change that culture that we here at St. Stephen, Deaconess Kim, myself, Kathleen, in the office, is that we're really just trying to walk and help you guys to be that faith formation thing at home. And I know sometimes that kind of sounds like very overwhelming, but if you really think about it, the church has been entrusting that to the church, the families have been entrusting that to the church, and it's really only 1 hour a week, right? Because you come to church, and Sunday school is only 1 hour a week, so it's really, that simple. You're not going to change the church. Going to church, you're still going to do that. You're still going to be going to Sunday school, so that's no different either. But, if you're spending at least an hour on something like this, it's going to make a huge difference, because then your kids are seeing that this is important to you. You're involved in this process. If it's important to mom and dad, then you got a 75% chance that that child is going to hang with the church when they get into college and beyond. I mean, so statistically, it's just a great motivator, right? To be a part of that type of thing. So, and, to the guys that are here too, when dads are involved, the numbers go even much higher, much higher. Not to lose hope, moms. I mean, do your best and do it. That's not on we've got a lot of kids here that it's been their grandmother that's made a big difference in their lives too. So I mean, these are important. And as we walk through this program, we're gonna add people to your support group for your child going forward. You know what I mean? So we don't want you to just feel like, well, it's just going to be us alone. When they get a little bit older, we'll be talking about getting at least 5 to 6 mentors that your child can say, this is a person that I trust. This is a person that if I have a faith question, I can go to them. We'll work through this as you guys kids are growing and here. So, all right. So any questions right off the get-go on this? All right. Good. So I'm just going to run down the sheet a little bit here. So I did modify this a little bit, but I just like to be upfront that if I can steal information from somebody else, I just do it. So why reinvent the wheel? So Pastor Andrews at St. Matthew has done a lot of the information on this, and like I said, he's kind of the connection to the district with it too. All right. So we kind of did the introductions, right? So over the next 17 years or so, God has entrusted raising your child. Probably read that wrong. So we're here to help build relationships with other families in the congregation, equip you to teach your children on many different topics of the faith. So this word telos, so this is being connected. This is why it's kind of cool, is because probably about, I don't know, when Pastor Cal was still here, so it'd probably be like 7 years ago. We went back, And it was like, instead of buying a different curriculum from CPH every single year, Concordia Publishing House, because they changed it up. I mean, I was always a believer, or at least thought, that says, well, we should probably find some kind of plan or curriculum that you would just stick with. Because it's like, okay, in school they do that, right? If you're a teacher, it's like, we don't just make it up every year. We say, okay, this is going to reach the goals that we want to reach it to. So we did it with this Kingdom Quest, which is connected to King of Kings in Omaha, another big church, doctorate guy that kind of put this stuff together. So this is really you'll find this, and when I shoot you guys more information from this, I can give you an electronic copy because it's got some links to a couple things that if you want, you can explore those a little bit more. But that's one of the links where the place goes to. So they use this word telos, which again, it's a Greek word. It means end, or it's your goal, purpose, or function, or something like that. The thing that you are driving for. So it gives you a real simple explanation. If you're playing Major League Baseball, what's the telos? Well, it's to win a World Series, right? So again, you kind of see the foundation of what we're talking about here. So when we think of that, right? When we think of that telos that we want to have, we have to have that in mind for our kids. What is our goal, right, for them when they graduate from high school, when they hit high school, when they find a spouse, right, when they start having kids of their own? What is the goal that we would have for them? And then once we understand the goal for them, then we can start to do the things that would help us to get to that kind of goal. It's kind of like any kind of financial planning, retirement, or any of those types of things. Everybody's going to say the same thing. If you don't have a goal in mind, how are you going to possibly get there? So again, this is really no different in that regard. So I think it's just worthwhile to say, if you don't have this for your kids, there's already powers at be out there in the world that are helping your kids choose this sort of thing. You follow me? And unfortunately, the church is kind of losing the battle in this regard for where we're going. So again, I don't necessarily want to go through every single thing on this particular paper, but if you follow me, right, what does the worldly tell us of our age? This one goes to marriage right away. We're going to start talking about marriage there. But the same thing is true for our marriages, for our families, for our kids. Okay, that this is the document how it's going to work through as we go through there. All right. So the first bullet point that they're going to start with, and again, I want to add a little bit of information into this because I know you guys could go back to this and read this a little bit. But if we think about how does the world portray marriage today? What do you think? What is talked about? What is marriage about? Is it thought of highly? Is it thought as necessary even?
A lot of times not necessarily necessary.
Yeah.
Kind of like a mix. Either like just waiting to get married, or I know in Europe, like a lot of people just don't get married.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or not so much as it's not like unity. You get married, but a lot of people still prioritize themselves rather than acting as like a team.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people think of it like taxes, or like
it's a formality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think marriage it's still, they value individuality in marriage, not teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it's society now. And then there's got to be a trial period before marriage, which I never agreed with. You got to cohabitate with somebody for years. You got to jump all the hurdles and pass all the tests, and maybe I might marry you. And I think it's not valued, or it's used as like a carrot dangling in somebody's face that they just get started along for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or some get more excited for the actual process of a wedding than the actual marriage.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and I kind of got that a little bit later, in there, And so, just to kind of make sure we're moving through this and not getting totally wrapped up for hours and hours and end on this. I put the, Ephesians 5, in there. And again, it just talks about, these are pretty much straight out of our liturgy when we do weddings, those types of things, about husbands or wives submitting to husbands. What does this mean? Well, it's like the church submits to Christ. In other words, we have a common goal and purpose on what we are working towards in unity there. Husbands, love your wives. Well, how much? Well, as much as Christ loved the church, that is, he gave his life up for the church. So if you're putting that together, right, husbands, it's like, okay, I would sacrifice everything for my wife on that regard, there. So it's so important. Eunice and I just celebrated 35 years of marriage. So it's kind of interesting because the guy that wrote this, he's in the middle of raising kids, right? So he's got kids from, 1-year-old to, I think, like up to 3rd or 4th grade, at this point. So the couple of things that I really, over the years, that had experience with, and I think maybe some of that came up in premarital counseling too. It's just like, the marriage has to make sure that that's the number one relationship that your kids see too. That you are a united front, that you guys cannot be penetrated. Your marriage, comes first. So, for example, if mom said no and they came to ask me to get a different answer, that was not going to end well, right? You probably maybe had the same experiences growing up, but, these are the kind of things that you want to make sure that you're staying, really solid in front. Another really, cool thing, we got this out of like Growing Faithful Families. We had a couch time. It was called a couch time. So this is when our kids were a little bit older. But we would be on a couch together and the kids could not come and bother us because we were at 15 minutes of couch time, and it was interesting to see the kids just react like, they didn't care if we were there earlier or not. Now we just set a rule that you can't come up and bother us while we're on the couch. Then, of course, it's crying and this, that, and everything. It's like their world's going apart. So it was like, okay, well, you're off to your room. You just send them away and that type of thing. But it was kind of interesting because they were even saying like, okay, sometimes kids like come in the middle of the night and they want to sleep with you, and this type of thing. And so what we were noticing even with that, and this is what the science behind it was, is that the kids actually want to see you guys together. They want to see that you're having this. And that really shook a lot of that they didn't need to come in the middle of the night to see us together. Because that's what the kids want to come in. They're seeing you because they want to see that you are together. So there's a little bit of psychology going on with all of this sort of stuff too. Long and short of that is, this was 25 years ago that I did this class. So there probably is something better, but there's something out there. So it's just something that I want to encourage you guys to say, hey, we're going to work on our marriage often. Right? We're going to work on our marriage, especially when the kids are growing up. We're going to make sure we're taking care of that unit because that is going to give them the stability that's, beyond there. You guys didn't say it, so that was good. That we're not picking up on it. But for some people, marriage is about making me happy, right? Well, you know what? In the Bible, it doesn't say anything about being happy in marriage. It just says stay married until you die. That's your requirement. So if you want a happy marriage, that takes work, right? So that's our focus is to, you got to work at it and keep it going. And it is really a big thing for your parents or for your kids. I remember I worked a ton. I was working at least 60 hours a week. At one time, we were going to have Eunice work, but that just didn't make any sense because it's like you can't take care for all these kids that were there, and it just was the way it worked. So, I did primarily the working. She stayed home with the kids, and that's how it worked for us. For us as we were, raising the kids when they were younger, and just being reinforced on that it is kind of God's design that the guy is the provider for the family, that type of thing. So the rules can Not that it always has to be that way, because I know that we have differences, that take place today. But, it was so good for those kids to have, Eunice home with them when I was not, when I was having to work crazy hours. But the interesting thing about it is that our kids, like if you're thinking about that, I don't know that they really were resentful in that regard, because like we still did things together as a family. So it wasn't like I, worked 60 hours, and on my 3-day weekend I was off on a fishing trip with the guys or something like, we didn't do that. We were still a unit. So when I was home, we were doing things as a family and those types of things that way. So, all right. So any questions on, that up to this point?
No, but I do have a comment that Odin thinks it's like so funny when we kiss. Like, and he's only 20. And we'll be like, should I kiss Dad? And he's like, yes. And then he watches the whole time. Yeah. So,
They definitely
age already,
notice. Yeah.
He gets really excited that we're gonna.
Tom just looks at us like, what are you?
And then he's
That's
more
weird.
likely to then kiss us afterwards.
Okay.
Like he'll be like, well, now I'll kiss you guys.
See you guys.
Because you did it first. Yeah.
No, that's cool. That's a really good thing. I remember Mom and Dad used to doing that, and then me as my sister and I would try to break them up, try to get between them, and then they would not let us. So it was just so fun. So, yeah, very good. All right, so moving on from there, on this next page, right? What does the worldly tell us of our age for parenting? And I think this is important, and I think it follows right after marriage, right? So what do you see? What do you see in the world when it comes to parenting?
Let the kid be who they are and they decide who they are is what I've seen a lot of. And even if you get lost in a rabbit hole on social media, it's a lot of woke parenting, teaching your kids affirmations like, who are you? I'm a leader. Or first, I think I listened to one and it was feel, react. What do you do? I feel, then I react on my feelings. And having this kid say those things out loud over and over, maybe every day. So I just think it's a lot of the parent putting the ball in the kid's court is what I've seen a lot
And I
of.
think it's parents doing they feel like they need to do what makes them happy, prioritize work, and then the kids, they're flexible. So they'll adapt to it. Fitting them in your lifestyle.
Pushing off the harder work, making the kid as the excuse, saying they're flexible, but at the same time kind of avoiding the more difficult aspects of raising a kid.
I think you guys will learn when you have a child in school, maybe public school system. I didn't see this as much when my son was in Lutheran school, but they create a huge separation between the parents and the school. We can't tell them how to do their homework. Teacher knows best, and you guys will fight that. I already know that we will because we've been fighting it up, and it just happens these days. I see all parents struggle with. They want to keep the parents out of school, and it creates a huge rift between the parents and the children and the teachers, and it's bad. And I see that a lot. It's a completely different world when you go to school.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of picking up a little bit of what you were saying, Sally Jo, about the success or happiness, being the the main kind of thing. I get a kick out of the vicarious living too. I hope I didn't do too much of that, right, with the kids in sports and stuff like that, and that's there, and and not that, like I said, obviously I would always make some changes on what I did. Probably wouldn't yell at the referees as much as I did, so that probably wasn't the greatest example. But you know what I mean. It just you kind of see these things, and so not that sports are bad. I remember this was back before I was pastor. We were coach pitch with my twins, and we were man, it was tough because we won a game. We're going to be in the championship. Well, they don't play the game at like 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning, and so we had a choice, to make. And most of the kids that were on the team were Lutherans. And I just said to them, hey, our church has a 5:30 service, on a Saturday. I said, we're going to go here. A couple of Wisconsin Synods, so if they can't really come and worship with us, but I said, you can, if you want to come. But I said, hey, if you're not comfortable with that, we don't have to play this game. It doesn't matter, so we as a family, church or baseball family, decided that we would do the church option at 5:30, and then we would come and play in, the tournament that was there. But, and then I just gave it to the, organizers of it. It's just like, okay, starting at 10 o'clock, you can't start at noon, you can, you don't have to do this kind of thing. And so, so it's just trying to kind of set the stage for those sort of things. One time Justin was on a select team here in Kansas City, and it was just like, they had a game 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, gives no option, so coach knew, sorry, we're not going to be there. Probably for some kids that might not be the starting point guard, that maybe makes a big difference on their team. But that's a choice, that's a choice. But they knew they weren't going to have them for the first game, and that's just the way it was. We had to kind of draw the lines somewhere. Now, if it was, if it started at 10:30, we could, you get the 8 o'clock church in, and you can go do these things, so it's still setting, the proper examples that are that way. So I threw in the Ephesians 6:4, right? Just on how to raise kids and all those types of things. It's just, it's just a matter of when we're parenting, just having that mindset that my number one priority for myself is my relationship with Jesus. My second is with my spouse, keeping our things in order. And then our third is that we want to make sure our kids have a good relationship with Jesus. And what does that look like? How do I model that? How do I help them, to be equipped in that particular regard? Some of these examples are pretty hard. I know I said it in the Bible class, because we have an online church and we can offer these resources, I may be being somewhat of a softie by simply saying, okay, you're in Omaha, you can watch church and Sunday school on the way back home. So if you really have to go do the traveling tournament thing and all that kind of stuff, then okay, then you're watching it either in the motel room or you're watching it on the way home. And so it's giving you an opportunity to still say, this is still very important in our, in our lives. And better yet, if you're on teams that you're going to have that be a priority. Maybe it's the team that gets together and they do church together. To me, that's even better yet, because we're like, hey, we're willing to go to the tournament this weekend, but we want to have an opportunity where we're doing church, and we would love, for you guys to be a part of that too. You get to be friends with these people that you hang out with. That's why I've always liked the Lutheran world, because, for one, they don't tend to schedule things on Sunday mornings, so that's a little bit better. But you're still connecting and doing things. I remember I missed out on a couple of the tournaments that the kids would go to because they were weekend tournaments, but they were going to church in Jeff City because that's where the tournament was. And so it's like, okay, we're Lutheran school, we go here, then we go to church, and with the rest of the Lutherans that have all gathered in Jeff City to do this tournament, that type of thing. So there's some cool things that can happen with that too. So, So any questions about, those type of things? Again, just moving on a little bit, when we go a new family becoming one flesh, I just think that this is kind of an interesting thing. They give a couple of statistics. I don't really want to, we kind of talked about, the avoidance of marriage. This thing was new to me, the MGTOW. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about that before. That was kind of new to me, but it sort of makes sense to me. Then it's giving some statistics. These are all coming from Pastor Andrews, so I didn't look at any of this stuff. So I don't know if it's whether it's true or not, I don't doubt it. I just don't know when it came from, that time. But I do think, when we're talking about this, a new family becoming flesh creates community, and we're seeing a collapse in our society because we're bucking against community, and whether it's whether like they'll want to say, okay, the world will say, well, we're the United States of America is a separation of church and state, this type of thing, but it doesn't really matter what society is. Lutherans are very good at breaking down this understanding into two kingdom types of topics. So the one kingdom is the church kingdom, it's the church world. Of course, God cares very much about that world. In fact, he sent his son Jesus to die for us, and it's based on forgiveness. And it's a great foundation. But sometimes I think other people get really mixed up with God's rule in what we call the left-hand kingdom or the kingdom of the government. And again, I don't want to get sidetracked into an hour-long conversation about all of this sort of thing, but I think what is important for us to realize is that God cares about that kingdom just as much as he cares about his other kingdom, the church and the state, church, government. These things he cares equally for, and will hold everybody accountable for how they're supposed to be doing it. So, it's freeing because you don't have to go out on Facebook and blast all the politicians because, God will take care of that for you. Just long and short of it. But I'm just simply saying is that a society may think that it can govern however it thinks it can govern, but if it's not governing according to the principles and standards for which God has established those to be founded upon, they will crumble. Okay? And so that's all I'm simply saying. So the idea and foundation of community, when we don't have a government that is promoting family and that community that is a social fabric for our society, it's not promoting a healthy thing, and it won't last forever. You can find the studies anywhere you want to go, right? And especially the biggest telltale is when there's not a dad in the home, there's chaos in social society. So again, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's just the way God designed it. And if we buck against it, it doesn't go well. So we just simply see that.
I can speak from experience.
What's that? Yeah.
Very much.
Mm-hmm.
Very much agree.
Yeah. And so, again, we can control what we can control, so we'll continue to move in that regard, right? Just making sure we're understanding what God's design for marriage is and how important this is. So when we talk about that, right, I'm going to skip over what makes it difficult to live intentionally in our marriage. Just with all the things around us in our world that are going on, I think we've kind of covered and moved up to this. I just want to, jot down to that bottom paragraph, the Telos, the ends and the outcomes and the goals. So we were just talking about this a second ago, right? In pre-marriage counseling, and so I use that ZO score. So it's kind of funny because couples are planning a wedding and we are planning a marriage. That's what I'm trying to do, trying to create a lifelong thing. So it's just good that we just in your own time, just keep reviewing these types of things. Review why you're, getting married. What are your goals? What have you talked about those goals? And if we meet again in 20 years, what would what would make you say then that it was worth it, right? So just kind of think about those sort of things as you are working through this in your own lives, right? Okay, so I just want to kind of go back to the scriptural reasons with marriage, right? So obviously companionship, not good that the man's going to be alone, find a helper fit for him. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife. So it's companionship, it's support. That same thing was just quoted up there. Procreation, God bless them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. It's to point us to Christ. Christ gives us that, or St. Paul gives us that the mystery is profound. I'm saying that, a marriage with a husband and wife is compared to the church, right? Christ being the groom and the church being the bride. That example that's kind of given there. So, when we get to this, what do scriptures teach that the telos of our life is? What does Jesus teach the purpose of life is? And so then it gives us the little, Bible verse, that Mark Bible verse, and it comes up in a lot of different places. It's just the 2 great commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And, that's truly can be reflected within a marriage, right? And when we have that understanding, when we have that in the forefront of us, it helps us understand what marriage is about, how we're building that unit, together and being there for one another. All right. Any questions on this? Like I said, I kind of want to get back to the parenting side of it a little bit. Not that I don't think marriage is important, but it's good that we're taking a brief look at that. So, all right. Any comments up to their thoughts? Okay, I'm going to jump to the middle bullet there. The 2 become one flesh again. This was kind of an interesting thought, and so I'm going to run with Pastor Andrews on this. It says, the 2 become one flesh again. Love, agape, creates a community. So literally in the form of a child. So I don't know. That's kind of a different take. I've never really heard it explained that way before, but I really kind of like that thought process. Is that okay? Yeah, because I thought that was pretty cool. And the statement that's back there, right? This is what makes divorce horrific for the children, as their very humanity is ripped into halves and called into question. These again are his words, they're not my words, but I do know, I do know that that's always been said. Not that somebody should stay in an abusive relationship or something along the lines of that, but a bad marriage is better than a divorce, is what what's always been the statement that's there. So what does that mean, or what is it talking about? Well, I just think it stresses the importance of us continuing to work on our marriage, because if we can keep our marriage strong, it's going to be easier to raise kids, because they're going to be more whole in that regard. So any questions or thoughts on that? I said I'm very careful how to go down that path, because there are some people that stay in a very abusive relationship because they feel like they would be violating God's word if they walked away from that. And I don't ever want to make sure we're, promoting something along the lines of that. We have a lot of resources to help people to get out of those situations, and we should support anybody that is being abused in that regard, that they get out of that relationship, for sure. But when we start at the foundation of just seeing why our marriage is so important, I think that's re-stresses the idea of how important it is for us to continue to invest into our marriage, because that's really what's going to be best for the kids. Tracking with me on that? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So the second bullet, right? Now that you have added a child or children into your home, how is it harder to live intentionally? What do you think? And if not, that's good, right?
I think for us, we waited. Like we were wanting to wait even longer than we ended up waiting. And I think that has helped us be intentional, because, and maybe this is selfish and maybe this is the wrong way of thinking, but we had 4+ years of time together, and with knowing that we would like to have children. So it wasn't like we weren't having them because we didn't want to, and then one day we changed our minds. But knowing that we would have children, and then once we did, we'd have them forever, we, held off for a little while. And then now that we have Odin and we have all that time together that we can remember,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's as much resentment. And so we can be really intentional about this new chapter we're in.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we have been intentional as parents because we just have embraced the next chapter.
At the same time, you can be intentional with something. Like a silly example is like, oh, he's gonna drink milk, and then you find out like, oh, he's lactose intolerant, and then like you're intentional about that. Well, then you're just gonna have all kinds of problems because now he has to drink lactate. So yeah, like I think you just have to be flexible. Like you kind of said, Matt, like you don't want the kid to be flexible for you. You need to be flexible for the kid. So sometimes you have to be. Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. Mm-hmm.
But I think it's you need constant reminders, and that's why it's good if your family has a strong faith, or you're surrounding yourself by church family because they remind you like to be intentional. So I could see how it would be really hard if you didn't have those people in your life reminding you need to be intentional. You need to take care of him. You need to take care of your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think we have the upper hand there too, where we just have a lot of support.
Yeah.
From people who are Christians or people who are not selfish and they know the importance of being intentional as parents and with each other.
Good. Anybody else?
Well, with having a child, now it's not only your spouse that you have to be intentional about, but also the child too. So it's a matter of splitting up, well, working together to pay attention to the
Split
child.
responsibilities.
Yeah, and just you have more things to do in the same amount of time.
Yeah, I'd say there's a different level of intentionality before you have kids versus when you have them. At least how I felt when Anna was born. It was like, it's tough to explain, but like, oh, now we really need to be intentional before kids. You know, I'm saying this wrong, but having fun, it's new marriage, there's no kids, and when you have a child, it can still be fun. Some parts aren't, but it's a different type of intentionality that has a lot more depth, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like the responsibility of the child now. Too.
Yeah, which is both scary, but it's a different type of fun. But yeah, you have the responsibility of a child that is yours.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to prioritize, like, instead of maybe doing things with friends and
Yeah, something that would have been
staying in and being with the family.
Yeah.
No, I know, like the premarital tool that I would use, it definitely hits couples that would suggest that, like, it doesn't add anything to the marriage. This wouldn't be stressful on the marriage, or like bringing another human into this relationship will have no impact on what's going on. So it sets off red flags, because it's like, because this will change your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, from my own experience with that, like early in our marriage, I was working with my parents in their business at home, right? And so some of that involved dog training. Well, there's a certain element of, you go hunting to help train dogs and those types of things. But I mean, I remember at one point, Eunice was kind of like, okay, you don't get to go hunting all the time, and I'm stuck here all the time at home. You know what I mean? So you work through those sort of things, and so it's just balancing those types of things out. But as I was looking and watching other marriages with people that had kids, a lot of them still wanted to do their boys' weekends and their girls' weekends and those kind of things. And I'm not trying to bash anybody that's doing those types of things, because if it works for you, great. If that works for you, then fine. But I think that you're losing a little bit of the understanding of what God has for you in this community, is that, a husband shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and you are now committed and responsible for this new community that you are building. You know what I mean? And in that community, this is where I want to, re-stress back in here is that, just as much as you would be committed to that kid that he knows how to hit a fastball or a curveball, you got to be committed to that kid that they have the tools that they are going to need to when their faith gets challenged, that they're not shaken. Do you follow me? And that only comes from that sort of community and intentionality that's being taken place there. And that does put more responsibility and more burden on you because it has to, right? I mean, there's nobody else can do that except for you, for that community that you're raising. So that kind of makes sense in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, people can work out how they do things and how they want to do things. It's like, most couples have work 2 jobs, that both spouses work or some don't. But I mean, it's just more of a matter of how you're still doing that, how you're being intentional about what you're doing with your child at home, faith-wise and your walk-wise. So. All right, any thoughts, questions on there? Where are we at? Because I want to make sure. How much?
My phone.
Is that accurate? I never trust a clock at this church.
It's 11:10.
11:10. Okay. So are you guys good to go for a little bit longer?
Yeah.
Okay, because I think we were 11:30 scheduled to go. Okay. All right. Yeah. So I'm going to flip the page and see if there's anything else that I wanted to left out. I used this passage in the presentation on Sunday. This is just, I think Moses giving the commands to the people, just, how diligent we need to be about teaching our kids, the faith. The interesting thing that I think, I'm such a real big fan of Old Testament stories. So we had the Eggermeyer's book. I don't know what you guys have at home, but you really can, even at a young age, I saw like Emmeline and Zach were doing, what did they say? Just even when the kids were just little. I think it was like, I think it was Abba. It was Abba, Father, Amen. Just something real brief before eating, because, not that it's bad to do a prayer, but I mean, just some simple prayers too, like ABC 1, 2, 3. Thank you, God, for feeding me, and just come up with something that's simple. Don't make it real complicated. And now, of course, they've got 4 kids, and then they got like 5, not quite 5, but they always do at least 2 prayers before they eat, that type of thing. They had a little smaller Bible story or Bible book or something like that. But what I see the DCEs, like the directors of Christian education, the youth workers, for lack of a better word, saying like the ones that are at the National Youth Gathering, the ones that are pretty well known and all those kind of things, they're really pushing hard on the stories like Daniel and the lion's den, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Just the stories that we see where God is performing some pretty powerful things in their lives. Just the more of, even the Samson stories and just those kind of stories, so that they're grounded and they have that in their back pocket, because if they're facing something real heavy in life, they need these examples of the faith in their heart, right? They need these in their minds that no matter what happens in this life, God still has me. You know what I mean? So I think that's pretty good, forecasting what potentially could happen, in our country or in our world or what have you. But I just think those are very foundational stories. So I was glad that we did that. We pretty much wore that book out. Still have it today. We still pull it out today, the Eggermeyer's Bible story. But I think I used the sample too of the Children's Garden of Bible Stories. I noticed that's not in the group of ones that they hand out, but it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't really matter that much about which one they're doing in particular, because you can find all these things online too. Concordia Publishing House still has the Children's Garden of Bible Stories. The little anchor books, I've been handing a couple of them out for children's messages, so you'll see that kind of thing. I like to kind of repeat doing those things, but those are like $2. You know, I mean, you could probably get the entire collection for $80 from Concordia Publishing House. You know, and it's going to have plenty of little stories, but it's just giving them, you know, those little stories to really build the foundation for them that's there. So the small catechism, I like that because my first catechism connects a biblical story to the doctrine teaching that we're, you know, doing in the small catechism. So these are real good things for them to kind of learn. So any questions about that? I like the holiday traditions. So I'm jumping way down to that third bullet point from the bottom. You know, it's kind of funny because I mean, I always laugh because my sponsor was my mom's sister. One of them was my mom's sister, and she was a born again Christian. You know, just a Bible thumper kind of person. You know, just real pro evangelical. And you know, she was convinced my grandpa was going to hell because he was Catholic and he didn't really have a faith that would, you know, that he'd wear out there. But you know, I just laugh because I'm like, he made sure all of his kids, and they had 9 in their family, all went through the Catholic school. And yeah, he might have been cussing the people on the parking lot driving out of church on Sunday morning. That probably was him to a T. But like one of my greatest memories of him was he would lead the Lord's Prayer at Thanksgiving. You see, these are the kind of memory things that were, you know, foundational in those types of things. So traditions are great, you know, just to kind of get those things. So I still think it's funny because I just one of those weird things, like my grandfather was in a home. My uncle and aunt that would go see him would kind of like, you know, it was Whoville. You never knew who you were going to be when you visited him or who he was going to be because he had a lot of like World War II he fought. You know, he was a fighter pilot in there. So sometimes you'd be in the cockpit with him when you went back, you know, so it's just bizarre stuff. So, so my most antagonistic uncle against the faith, right? So he was definitely a 70s flower child guy. Yeah, so my grandfather comes through totally with it, you know, completely lucid. And he tells my uncle that he just came back to say goodbye. So everybody's in heaven waiting for him. He's naming all these people in the family that have died. So he's telling my uncle this. My uncle's like floored. So he starts calling everybody, right? So my uncle, he calls my mom, and they're on a phone, and they're traveling in South Dakota. So my wife, you know, she's just saying bye to everybody. So it's like my wife jumps on there. He knows her name. We don't live there. Now, he maybe could remember that because he was at our wedding. Maybe he was at our wedding. Yeah, he was at our wedding. But he knew all my kids. And it's like we have not been to see him. And he's got all this kind of stuff there. So, but I think the funniest thing would have been is that when my aunt died, then she would walk into heaven and there would be my grandpa. So, how did you get here? They both would be like, how did you get here? Because he was convinced she was going to hell because he wasn't in the Catholic Church too. But yeah, so, you know, I mean, these things they're good stories, you know, just have these stories, pass them on so they have that kind of faith. Because that's what the Bible is really. It's that collection of stories of the faith. And we've got them in our families too. So, all right. Okay, flipping the page. See if there's anything else here that I really want to say. Okay, so again, bottom one, right? Why are we here? Telos planning. You know, why do you want your children in Sunday school, confirmation, and youth group? When they graduate from high school, where do you expect them to be? When I last asked the high school parents, here's what they shared. So this is Pastor Andrews asking the high school parents at St. Matthew, and these are some of the things that they were writing down there. Just to kind of touch on a few, things. Knowing where to turn when your faith is challenged. So hopefully by the time your kid is graduating and going from high school, we'll have a good core group for them of people that they trust, they feel like they can talk to and share their doubts, with. That would be kind of helpful if we can get to that particular point. They don't all have to be the same people. I think, I've always stressed that, since, coming through this particular program, people are like, well, I'm not sure how I fit into this growing faithful family thing. And so I'm kind of like, all right, well, remember this particular situation and how this person says that they really trusted this particular person, which that was you, that they feel like they could come and talk to you in that regard. There's been a couple parents that have, followed through with this. Like, for example, I think some of you guys might know Selena Speaks. Okay, she's here. I remember her doing this for her two kids, where she connected them with faith people that they could talk to, and they still make those connections even today. So some of our members of our congregation are like mentors for their kids and those types of things. So they're people they can go to and they can count on and trust. So that'll be important. We'll get to those kind of things, through the program, as we develop them there. Yeah, that kind of covers that one. So let me see if there's anything else on the next page. How do we get here or there? Faith at home, devotions. So Deaconess Kim and Kathleen are going to try to get a little table set up somewhere where you can kind of go to get material if you want, or if you're looking for them. I said we're going to hand out these catechisms, the children's Bibles, regular Bible. They're going to get a lot of these things that are on here. Some of the things that are listed on here, like we're not giving hymnals out. So some of this is just a little bit different, but we're still working on different things that are going to connect with the milestones that we have. So I think like today, I don't know if Deaconess Kim brought them. She brought the little crosses
over there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So they're over there. So we'll make sure you grab a cross on the way out. So you can put that up in the room if you want, or put on a table, or whatever you would like to do with it. Or that's kind of the first step one that we're having, with there in there. So, but yeah, any questions that you have? I mean, I know, when the kids were easy, it was easy to do family devotions. I mean, it was easier, and we would, have those family devotions. I know I would like a lot of times ask the kids questions later, and to make sure they're paying attention, I would like get double desserts if you're going to answer the tougher questions, and so, I'd usually make it a pretty tough question. I think at one point our kids had all 12 names of Jacob's sons memorized, for example, just, I don't know why. Maybe that wasn't really that worth it, but some of our kids were pretty good with memory, and so they were like, okay, well, I'll learn 12 names for extra desserts, that type of thing. So, none of these things are bad kind of things that are there. Through the Lutheran school, my kids can sing the Bible, the Bible in order. I don't know if did you go to Lutheran school? Okay, I don't know. It's like they teach them those types of things. Can you sing the books of the Old Testament or the New Testament?
I have lots of things memorized that are
Memory class or something.
Yeah. So, no, exactly. When it got a little tougher, I mean, when we got to high school, I remember, boy, when you had Emily was a senior, Jeremy and Justin were sophomores, and Elizabeth would have been a seventh grader at that point. And there's like two of us, and they're in 4 different sports, and 2 different schools when you're kind of trying to do those things. Sometimes we would just resort to, right before we left in the morning, we would just do Luther's morning prayer together. So sometimes it's kind of hard because, there were nights where kids were getting home, we were getting home, from sporting events at 8 plus, sometimes 9 o'clock. It's hard to do family devotions at that time, let alone try to get food and then getting ready for bed, and they still have homework or what have you, all those types of things that go in there. So it can get challenging, so you might have to be creative with what you're doing at that time, but just, stay the course and make it a priority. Just figure it out. So, all right, any questions you guys have about the program or anything like that at this point?
How often are we going to get together?
So these things are designed. That's something that I got to kind of figure out a little bit more with those guys.
Like once a year? Is that what?
That is the next time we would gather to do one of these steps, right? Will be I think it would be the 1-year-old, but I think I'm not positive I should speak. Maybe it's 2-year-old that we hit the next point. But then there'll be a new, like, book or new something that we would do, and we will do this again one more time, or in a year. I don't know if it'll be exactly at this time. I'm not sure exactly how Kathleen and Deaconess Kim have sorted that out, but that's kind of the thing. Now, the thing that's, that we're hoping we will see a little bit more of, and how do we put this together, might be a little bit more challenging. This particular group might be a little bit easier with your mom's group. So that doesn't, kind of leaves the guys out, but maybe.
I can give you information. Okay.
Yeah, and maybe we can build, from that type of thing. So that would be good. We can maybe share the names, make sure we're sharing the names of that for invites to make sure everybody knows too on that regard. But we're hoping that it's more frequently that the parents of that particular group will get together and do those kind of things. We're really trying to stress, that the next steps that we're going to try and stress is that, Sunday morning, just everybody make sure they stay here. We either, sit in with your kids in the classroom, teach, or be in the Bible class or something along the lines of that. We're just really trying to kind of keep people from, we're going to eventually get away from people dropping their kids off for Sunday school and then leaving. That's the ultimate goal, that we don't have that. Hey, that's the ultimate goal, that we, get that avoiding, because that really is not setting a good example for our kids at all. If you drop them off, they go in and you leave. You're sending a message that you have to do this because this is something you have to do, but it's not really that important, because if it was important, then I would be here too. You know what I mean? And so we're hoping to kind of stem those tides. We have to, at minimum, have 2 people in a classroom too. I think that's going to be kind of the harder thing that we're going to be moving into 2023. This will be the first week where we actually have classes back, but at some point we are going to have to tell parents that we cannot have one adult in with kids. It's just the world we live in today. It's just too much of a liability for the person teaching the class and for, for all of that stuff. So hopefully we'll be gathering more, doing those types of things on a weekly basis. So this one's easy. The moms group is the outlet. We do have Roger Kutchkow is in the board of outreach, and he's wanting to kind of do more like young adult groups that get together. And I told him, I said, yeah, Vicar's already doing some of those things, and we've got connections with other churches to do those kind of things. But like men's group things, he's wanting to kind of start some fellowshipping on those kind of things too. So that might be, beneficial to do in those regards. So, hopefully we'll get back to, I think, did you do it once with Nate, gosh, the financial peace thing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think you maybe
did it
were.
twice, I think, right?
Okay. Yeah. So hopefully some of these groups will come back after, we could maybe say goodbye to the pandemic and start, some of these things again, getting those kind of things going, getting more stuff focused here. I think there was a women's group that met last night here.
It was really good.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys were there?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was really good.
Good. Yeah.
It was not what I expected. Like, and just in all aspects.
Yeah.
It was really, I liked it a lot.
Awesome.
And I want to go to the next one.
Yeah, me too.
Cool. Yeah, that's good.
Me too.
And I want you to come.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because we're trying to see a couple of those types of things come back to, so that'll be good. More fellowship, more connectedness. Ideally, I can't remember it. I have to almost next time I catch Pastor Andrews again, because we're doing the one time, and I think the one time thing has been from more of the perspective of, we went from a staff that we had 2 pastors, a deaconess, full-time secretary type thing. We went from that and then shrunk back to what we've got now. And, really there's no sign of us adding any additional staff at this point because of just giving and, all those kind of things that go with it, that are there. We're not in like financial dire straits, so I don't mean to paint, a negative picture on, where we're at in that regard. It's just more of a changing thing. And so, I told them, I said, well, I'm committed to this. This is, this is what I'm committed to be and doing here. I was like, activities, I do like to go do the explorers thing, where we do that kind of thing because, there's a good chance that Eunice and I would just do that anyway on our own. So it's kind of fun to hang out with people that like to try different craft beers and stuff like that too. So that's an easy one in that regard. But it's just, I'm even in the Sunday school programs, it's kind of like I appreciate people doing, an event for kids that are here and stuff like that. I just, my heart's a little bit more in that we do this together. You know what I mean? So, and a lot of times if you see K to 5th graders when they're here, you can't just have one parent running the whole thing, but why not everybody just be there for it? As opposed to one parent planning it, and that's done by a volunteer basis. And you guys all know how that works.
It's almost like a babysitter.
Exactly. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And how long are you going to do that? You're probably not going to do that long. I mean, that's kind of nice thing about, when you're doing a volleyball club, right? Or when you're hanging out with those parents, because we got one guy that coaches and they're the coach that's responsible for that, but they're wanting to do that. But it's not like at the games, you just sent them with that person and they're watching the kids. You're all there watching the games too. So to me, it's that kind of concept that this is something we're doing together, and we can take turns at it too. So that way we don't burn out volunteers and those kind of things. Now I'm 3 minutes over. So yeah, but you wanted to, you said you wanted to talk real quick about something too, or just, or are we
I don't know.
good? Okay.
I think we're good.
All right.
Yeah, the mom's group is going to talk about like what study we want to do next.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I don't think.
And were you going to do that today, or
Yeah.
you're going to do that?
Yeah, we're just going to have a meeting after this.
Just a real quick one. Okay. Well, let's close in prayer. Does that sound good? And that way we can get our kiddos from downstairs. All right. So, gracious Heavenly Father, again, we give you thanks for the many blessings you give to us, especially the gift of children. Lord, we pray that you would equip us through your word to be the best that you would have us be at raising your kids, knowing fully that you forgive us in our failures and that it is your spirit that you send into our lives that helps us to be equipped to do this. So send that spirit, be with us, remind us of your great love for us in Christ Jesus, and assure us that you have chosen us to be the ones that raise these little ones in the way that they should go, because you have made us parents after all and promised that you would never leave us or forsake us. So we're counting on that. We're counting on a good year, and we pray that you would transform the hearts of this congregation to see the importance of this growing faithful family ministry so that we bring honor and glory in all that we do to you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.